James Gunn's Superman is finally here, so today I am doing my tier list ranking of all of the Superman movies. I will be talking about all 9 live-action Superman films, and briefly about the 2 Justice League cuts as well. Once again, I have 5 tiers. My F tier is called Kryptonite. These are for movies that are so bad that they almost kill Superman. My D tier is called Losing Powers. That's self-explanatory. My C tier is called Clark Kent, for movies that kind of blend into the background. They're average, like Clark Kent himself. My B tier is called Solid as Steel, and my A tier is just called Super. So, let's get into this list. Don't forget, the first Superman movie ever was actually Superman and the Mole Men from 1951. I actually have seen this one, but it's not even really a Superman movie, because at the time it wasn't possible to make a believable superhero on screen. The purpose that Superman serves in this story is to convince the townspeople to not be afraid of these mole men, which means that his powers don't matter within this film. On its own, I like the idea of paranoia driving the plot, but with no real villain and these cheap, laughable visuals, this movie is hard to watch. And I doubt any of you care about this movie as much as the rest, so let's move on. Superman and the Mole Men is definitely not offensively bad, like some of the future ones I'll talk about, but I can't put it anywhere except the bottom tier. It's Kryptonite. It's really bad. And then we get Superman the movie from 1978. There's no denying that this is a classic, and one of the most important superhero films ever made, but I'm sorry, it's really flawed. You have to remember that Christopher Reeve does not even show up until 45 minutes into the film, and we don't see him in the Superman suit for a whole hour. And for all that time, there's pretty much no conflict at all. It's kind of a slog to get through. The backstory of Krypton is pretty poorly done in my opinion. It looks boring, and it's slow, and Clark's childhood in Smallville is sadly underdeveloped too. There's only one scene with Pa Kent and Clark talking about the ways he should use his powers, so his parents' influence on him never has that impact that it should. I find the whole first hour to be weak, unfocused, and truly boring. But once Christopher Reeve is the lead and we see Superman in Metropolis, it's much more enjoyable. Reeve is fantastic in the role, as he acts out Clark Kent and Superman in 2 very distinct ways. That portrayal will always be special. I also like his dynamic with Lois, though that would get better later on. I love how Superman is set up as a humble, optimistic hero in a great montage of simple good deeds. He is shown as a selfless symbol of hope, but the characterization is surface level. We never really get deep into his motivations for why he chooses to be that hero. When it comes to the main plot, I also find that to be weak and uninteresting. Lex Luthor is such an underwhelming villain with his real estate scheme. I never felt the stakes or the weight of that conflict until Lois's death. And then there's the memorable time travel ending where Superman is able to reverse those events and save Lois. But then again, were there any consequences to using time travel? And if not, why was he told it was forbidden? That's kind of how this whole movie was. I enjoyed it on the surface, but I never felt the consequences of Superman's choices, which at the root is why I'm interested in the character. Part of the appeal is missing from this film, but I absolutely appreciated Reeve's performance, Donner's reverence for the character, and the simple, low-stakes crime fighting. All that was great, but overall I think Superman the movie is kinda average, like Clark Kent. And in 1980, we got Superman 2. Now before I get into this one, keep in mind that I've seen both versions of this movie, and they have kind of blended together in my mind as one. But I consider the Donner cut the true version, and that's the one I'll mostly be talking about. But I thought Superman 2 was an improvement over the original in a lot of ways. Clark and Lois' relationship is so much better, and it carries some of this film for me. Lois discovering his secret identity is so fun, and all of their scenes are good. All around, I think Superman 2 has far more compelling conflicts than the last one. Zod and the other Kryptonians upped the stakes and challenged Superman far more than Lex Luthor did. That's the physical conflict, and the emotional conflict is also improved so much. This film finally explores Superman's morals, motivations, and desires with the plotline of him losing his powers. He has to choose to be that hero again, to defeat Zod and save the world, while also sacrificing the more simple life that he desires with Lois. That idea of the hero sacrificing his normal desires in order to save everyone else is such a crucial story to tell, and it's why we love Superman. His powers aren't what make him special, it's his morals and his drive to symbolize hope for the world. That is the main reason that I believe this sequel is an improvement. I also think Lex Luthor is a lot better here. Gene Hackman is great, and it's enjoyable to see him try to gain leverage over Zod and then help Superman defeat him in the end. This film is great. But what was this ending? Everything was wrapped up except for Lois knowing that Clark is Superman. But here we see Superman using time travel again, or erasing Lois's memories with a kiss, just so that Lois won't know his identity. And I hate both versions of this ending, because it makes everything too easy for Superman, where he can just reverse anything that happened with no issues. It's a stupid bailout ending, no matter which cut you watched, but a really good film before that. Superman 2 is solid as steel. The series continues in 1983 with Superman 3, and from the start, this movie feels so off. They replaced Lois Lane for Lana Lang, which is just completely unforgivable, and Gene Hackman did not return to play Lex Luthor. Both of these things happened because Hackman and Margot Kidder spoke out against the treatment of Richard Donner in production of Superman 2. So now Donner, Hackman, and Kidder are all gone in Superman 3. And without these three major figures, the only thing keeping this franchise afloat is Christopher Reeve, who is still great, and he redeems some of this awful film. But basically ignoring everything with Lois in the past films immediately sets this movie up for failure, even though Lois does show up in one scene. Richard Pryor was cast in this film for some comedy, and he gets way too much screen time. It's not enjoyable at all. His character has something to do with a computer hacking plot, and Superman has to defeat a giant supercomputer as the big bad in the finale. It's tedious and boring. Before that though, we get some kind of new exploration of Superman. In this plotline, the synthetic kryptonite turns Superman evil, and we get a couple scenes showing what kinds of awful things he does. He pushes the Leaning Tower of Pisa up so that it's not leaning anymore. And he also blows out the torch at the Olympics because he's such a bad guy. This is when the movie feels like a parody. It's just so dumb. And that's before we get to the fight scene of evil Superman against Clark Kent in a junkyard. Clark Kent choking out the greasy, dirty Superman is so ridiculous and hilarious. It's easily my favorite part of this film. Whoever had this idea is an idiot, but also a genius. This movie is such a joke. It's hard to imagine it getting worse than this. Superman 3 is definitely losing powers. In 1987, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was released. The previous movie had the goofy, evil Superman plotline, but this one does even more to destroy this character. Here, Superman is depicted as a reckless, careless moron who reveals his identity for fun. He tells Lois who he is, takes her on a fly, and then erases her memory because he can do that whenever he wants. None of his actions have consequences. And yeah, Lois and Lex Luthor are both back, but they can't save this movie. There's also a scene where Clark agrees to a double date, where he has to show up as Clark and Superman separately.
Hey, what's up? I'm Spider-Man. Just thought I'd swing by and say hello to my buddy Peter. Hey, where's Peter anyways? He must be over. God, this is stupid. What am I doing?
It's fun in concept to see him switching back and forth as fast as he can, but it makes no sense why he would willingly take this risk of exposing his identity, and it ruins the character. You just get the feeling that he does whatever he wants and he doesn't care anymore. The main story of the film was attempting to be a timely message about nuclear weapons. Superman launches all the world's nukes into the sun for the sake of peace, but Lex Luthor creates this new scary villain named Nuclear Man, who only survives in sunlight. There's a lot of action between these two, and it ends up being so ugly and boring. The visual effects are genuinely worse than ever. This film forgot to have a budget for the effects, and it's nearly unwatchable. But at least it's only 90 minutes. The downfall of this series has come, and Superman 4 is kryptonite. It's the worst of the worst. It took 19 more years to get Superman Returns in 2006. This movie is one of a kind, in the way that it can't decide what kind of continuation it is. It's a reboot of Superman, it's an homage to the Reeve films, and it's even trying to be a sequel all at the same time. I think the respect that it has for the early Reeve films is admirable, but that may have held this back from being a truly great reboot for the 2000s. Bryan Singer's directing is a huge improvement. I think there are quite a few scenes that look really good, but this film is just way too long with a boring, dragging plot. I wish I didn't have to say boring this much. The drama of Clark's relationships is focused on far more than any Superman plot or action, and the story here is full of bad ideas, like the 5-year-old son that Clark didn't know he had with Lois. I think the biggest issue with this movie is actually the cast. I'm sorry, but I don't buy Brandon Routh's version of the character, and I think Lois was horribly miscast as well. I didn't enjoy any of the interactions or acting, except for Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. He was by far the most exciting and interesting part of this lifeless experience.
Wrong!
It's just frustrating that this 2.5-hour movie barely has anything memorable for Superman to do. This was a failed reboot, and Superman Returns is losing powers. In 2013, there was Man of Steel. As an origin story for Superman, I really do think this film does a better job than the classic 1978 film. I think the backstory of Krypton is greatly improved, with a fully imagined world this time. I also loved every scene of Clark's childhood with Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent. This is the most meaningful that relationship has ever been in the movies. The exploration of how Clark had to hide his powers growing up is so fascinating, and I finally felt that influence that Clark's parents had on him for the first time ever. All the backstory is worth the runtime to me. But no, Superman would never let his dad die in a tornado for the sake of hiding his powers. That scene was a fumble. Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill brought something very new to this character. Man of Steel does not fit the expectations for what Superman should be, but I respect this adaptation. The dynamic of Clark Kent, the news reporter, hiding his secret identity is not in here, and Superman isn't even a hero to Earth until Zod arrives to destroy it. That aspect is definitely missed, since Superman never really feels like the optimistic symbol of hope that he should be. He's just as scary as Zod to the average person, which was what Zack wanted, but I don't love that. Overall, I do respect this darker, more serious Superman though. It's different. It's not a definitive interpretation loyal to source material, but I'm okay with that. And in a way, the moodiness humanizes the character more than ever before, because he can't always be that optimistic Boy Scout in the dark world that we live in. Does that defeat the whole purpose of the character? Maybe. I think that will always be a debate surrounding this movie. But all I know is the Snyder cult needs to shut up, enjoy Man of Steel, and also appreciate a new, more faithful interpretation of this great character. Me personally, I can enjoy both. My final note on this movie is that there's way too much mindless explosion action near the end. It's hard to stay invested in that, but this movie is really good overall. Man of Steel is solid as steel. In 2016, we got Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. This movie as a sequel to Man of Steel is not bad. It aims to be a gritty, realistic story of the world reacting to Superman's existence. I think a world that fears Superman and doesn't trust him is a really good idea. Snyder's version of the character is about making Superman grounded in our world and seeing how different that would be compared to the lighthearted comic version. And I can respect this approach, but it really clashes when you're also trying to set up a whole cinematic universe. One half of this film is the realistic Superman versus the world, and the other half includes Batman and Wonder Woman for Justice League setup. That's what makes this movie a mess. I think this Batman is a very poor character. It makes sense that he would fear Superman, but the lengths that he goes to kill him is really dumb, and the rest of the Justice League setup is so out of place. This film doesn't do very much to develop Clark further. He doesn't feel like a real fleshed out person, and the Lois relationship is shallow. But there is one great thing they do for his character, and that is push him to his limits. No matter how bad Eisenberg was as Lex Luthor, I think the scheme that Lex had in this film was one of the best I've seen. He forced Superman to question how far he would go to save his mother. Would he kill Batman to free Martha just because that's what Lex Luthor promised? This conflict was great, except for Batman's part in it. And the climax against Doomsday wasn't as interesting, but Superman's sacrifice was decent. There's a lot in this film that I think is great, but the grounded elements don't work in the same story with the growing DC universe. Batman v Superman evens out to be kind of average, like Clark Kent. Now I'm going to try to get through the Justice League films fast because they're not Superman solo films like the rest of the list. The 2017 cut is disgustingly bad, and so is the Superman character. His resurrection, then remembering himself and helping the team, is all very rushed and meaningless. He's literally only used as a plot device of power to help the team save the day, instead of a person. Superman is horrendous in this version, and Justice League is kryptonite. But then in the Snyder Cut, it's improved so much, and it's shocking because it's the same bare bones of the story. More screen time for Lois, more time back at the farm, and a fantastic added scene of Clark listening to the voices of his fathers before getting the black suit. All of this makes for a far better story for Superman. It is far more emotional and meaningful, and it's the most epic depiction of Superman we've ever had. It's not perfect, but the last hour and 20 minutes of the Snyder Cut is some awesome Superman content, and I think it's solid as steel. And now we have Superman 2025. This is my Superman. This is the version I will love the most from now on, because they just nailed everything I wanted from the character that I didn't quite get in any past Superman film. I really do think this film has the best versions of every character. David Corenswet is my favorite Superman, Rachel Brosnahan is my favorite Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult is my favorite Lex Luthor. They were all cast perfectly and written wonderfully. The first interview scene between Lois and Superman is phenomenal. The dynamic between Superman and a Lois that knows his secret identity is something I've wanted more of, and this film crushed that. The interview scene beautifully sets up both characters and tells us so much about them. I love that this Superman is a guy who just wants to save as many lives as possible, no matter the kind of backlash he'll get. And I love that this Lois Lane can challenge him and make him better. Their relationship is the best. This Lex Luthor is no doubt the best film version yet. He's so hateable, and he's also incredibly smart and inventive with his technology and his schemes to get the world to hate Superman. I will say there is a wild twist in this film that I was not expecting, and it could be controversial, but what it did for me was highlight that the Kents are Superman's true parents. They are the ones who set him on the path to being a good-hearted hero, and I thought that was really special. So I really dug all these new versions of the classic characters. But I think the biggest part of this film's success is the fact that it's not embarrassed to be in a silly comic book world. It doesn't try to be grounded in our reality at all. This is a wild new world already full of monsters and superheroes like the Justice Gang, and it doesn't make jokes about itself because it's not ashamed to be comic-like. That is refreshing, to have a new universe that goes straight into the most unbelievable parts of its world, and that is my Superman. James Gunn finally struck the balance of character depth and also comical weirdness that was never fully perfected in any past iteration. I've never loved Superman and bought his motivations as much as I did in this movie. James Gunn's Superman 2025 is truly super. It is the only one so far that I can say is top tier for me. Even though I respect so many of the past Superman films, they never put it all together like the newest one did. The Christopher Reeve series overall had a hard time making me buy the stakes, while the Zack Snyder films had a hard time providing the real heart and soul of the character. But for me, the newest release got all of it right. So with the tier list completed, this is my ranking of all the Superman films from worst to best, without the Justice League films. 9 is Superman 4, 8 is Superman the Mole Men, 7 is Superman 3, 6 is Superman Returns, 5 is Batman v Superman, 4 is Superman 1978, 3 is Man of Steel, 2 is Superman 2, the Donner Cut, and 1 is Superman 2025. What'd you think of my list? What would you change? What's your favorite Superman? Tell me all of that in the comments section, but that will be it for this video.